Chinelo, my sister. Come, let us take a walk, just the two of us.
All right, sister.
Amaka, who are these people? Please don't do this. I'm your sister. Your own blood, Amaka, please. At least now, you won't take what is mine.
Amaka! Please don't! Sister!
Evening settled softly over the village, the kind of quiet evening that carried no warning of the storm about to rise, and for the first time in a long while, Amaka's voice was gentle as she called, Chinelo, my sister, the word so unusual, so sweet, that Chinelo paused where she stood, surprise flickering across her face, her heart cautiously opening to a hope she had almost buried, and when Amaka smiled and said, Come, let us take a walk, just the two of us, Chinelo hesitated, searching her sister's eyes for the familiar hardness, but finding none, only a softness she had longed for, so she nodded slowly, whispering, All right, sister, and together they walked, side by side, into the quiet embrace of the forest, leaves crunching softly beneath their feet, the air growing thicker, heavier, until Chinelo began to feel it, that strange unease creeping into her chest, and just as she turned to speak, shadows moved, figures stepped out from behind the trees, men, rough and silent. Their presence cutting through the evening like a blade, Chinelo froze, confusion washing over her face as her eyes darted from the strangers to Amaka, her voice trembling, Amaka, who are these people? And then, in a single horrifying moment, the truth struck her like lightning, her breath caught, her body shook, and she screamed, raw and broken, Amaka, what is this? As her knees hit the ground, the earth receiving her like a witness to betrayal, tears pouring down her face as she clutched her sister's legs. Sobbing uncontrollably, please don't do this, I am your sister, your own blood, Amaka, please. But Amaka's face hardened, her eyes cold, and with a force that shattered whatever remained of their bond, she yanked her leg free and stepped back, her voice sharp, laced with venom, at least now, you won't take what is mine, and behind her, her friends burst into wicked laughter, the sound echoing through the forest like a curse, while Chinelo's cries grew louder, more desperate, her hands reaching out, grasping at nothing as the men seized her, dragging her away, her feet scraping against the ground, her voice tearing through the air, Amaka. Amaka. Please don't leave me. Sister, but Amaka did not move, did not turn, did not care, and as Chinelo disappeared into the darkness, her screams fading into the night, the forest swallowed the last trace of her innocence. Wait. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to support this channel and get notified whenever we upload new stories like this, and don't forget to like, comment, and share this video with others. And now tell me, how can someone share the same parents, the same home, the same blood, and still carry so much hatred that they would sell their own sister into slavery? Have you ever experienced such deep betrayal from a sibling, and if you did, were you able to forgive? Let me know in the comment section, and now, come with me, let me take you through this deeply emotional African village story of jealousy, betrayal, pain, and ultimately, destiny. In a quiet compound where the morning sun stretched gently across the red earth lived the humble family known for their peace and unity, a family led by Okeke, a wise and calm farmer whose strength was not just in his hands but in the patience with which he spoke, and his wife Ngozi, a loving and deeply emotional woman whose heart beat fiercely for her children. Together they raised two daughters, Amaka, the first, whose beauty turned heads wherever she went but whose heart had grown accustomed to comfort and entitlement, and Chinelo, the second, gentle as the evening breeze and hardworking beyond her years, the kind of child who noticed what needed to be done even before a word was spoken, and every morning told the story of who they truly were, as Chinelo would rise before the cock crowed, tying her wrapper firmly, sweeping the compound with steady rhythm, her soft voice humming as she moved from chore to chore, then heading to the kitchen where the aroma of food slowly filled the air. While not too far away, under the shade of a wide tree, Amaka would stretch lazily, chewing on roasted corn or whatever she could find, her face twisted in mild annoyance as she called out, Chinelo, is the food not ready yet? Must I wait this long in my father's house? And Chinelo, pausing briefly with a small smile, would reply gently, "It is almost ready, sister, good things take time," before returning to her work without complaint. And when it was time to go to the farm, Okeke would carry his tools, glancing back to see Chinelo already beside him, eager and ready, while Amoka suddenly developed a mysterious weakness, placing the back of her hand dramatically on her forehead as she groaned, "Mama, I don't feel well today, my body is hot, I think I have a fever," and Ngozi, worried, would move closer, touching her lightly. "But you were fine just this morning," and Chinelo, passing behind them with a bundle of firewood, would lean slightly and whisper under her breath with a playful smile, "This sickness only comes when yam needs harvesting," causing even Okeke to hide a quiet chuckle as he shook his head, and somehow, by the time they returned from the farm hours later, dusty and tired, Amoka would be miraculously healed, sitting comfortably, eating and laughing as though nothing had ever happened, yet in all of this, Okeke and Ngozi never showed favoritism. They clothed them the same, fed them the same, loved them with equal measure, but while Chinelo earned admiration through her actions, through the quiet dignity of her labor and her ever-willing heart, Amoka demanded attention, craving praise without effort, her beauty drawing compliments she clung to, yet never quite feeling the restless space within her. And though the compound was filled with laughter and life, something unseen had already begun to grow, quietly, deeply, in the heart of the first daughter. Amoka began to notice the little things, the quiet praises that followed Chinelo wherever she went, the way villagers would stop and say, "That girl is a blessing to her parents," or "If only more children were like Chinelo," and though the words were never meant to wound, they pierced deeply into Amoka's heart, and one afternoon, as she stood by the doorway pretending not to listen, she watched her mother Ngozi smile warmly at Chinelo, her eyes glowing with pride as she said, "My daughter, you have made this house light," and in that moment, something dark stirred within Amoka, her jaw tightening, her fingers curling slightly as a voice whispered inside her mind, sharp and bitter, "Why is it always Chinelo? Am I not the first child? Am I invisible in this house?" And though Chinelo never saw this storm brewing, she continued to love her sister in the only way she knew how, gently and without condition, sitting behind her one evening, carefully parting her hair as she braided it neatly, her voice soft and hopeful, "Sister, this style will make you even more beautiful," but Amoka jerked her head slightly, irritation flashing across her face as she snapped, "Leave my hair, I did not ask you," yet Chinelo only smiled faintly, swallowing the hurt, and later that night, when food was shared, she quietly set aside the best portion for Amoka, covering it carefully, and when Amoka found it, instead of gratitude, she scoffed, "Do you think this will make me like you?" pushing the bowl aside before eventually eating it anyway, and as the days passed, Amoka drifted further away from the warmth of her home into the loud, careless world of her friends, Nkiru, Ifeanyi, and Chidinma, girls known across the village not for good deeds but for trouble, their laughter always too loud, their voices always carrying gossip, and under the shade of a distant tree, they would gather with gourds of palm wine, drinking freely, mocking anyone who lived responsibly. "Look at those ones going to the farm like slaves," Nkiru would sneer, and Ifeanyi would add with a laugh, especially that Chinelo, always acting like she is the mother of the village, and Amoka would join in, though something uneasy flickered beneath her laughter. And in one of their many careless moments, music played from a distant drum, and Amoka jumped up to dance, swaying wildly without rhythm, her steps clumsy, her balance uncertain until she tripped and fell hard to the ground, dust rising around her, and for a split second there was silence, then her friends erupted into cheers instead of concern, clapping loudly as Chidinma shouted, "Yes. That is why you are our queen," and Ifeanyi added, laughing uncontrollably, "Queen of laziness. Even the ground wants to embrace you," and Amoka, brushing dust from her wrapper, forced a laugh, lifting her chin as though crowned by their mockery, but deep inside, the emptiness remained, growing quietly, dangerously, waiting for the moment it would finally take over. Night fell gently over the compound, wrapping the huts in a quiet stillness broken only by the soft chirping of crickets, and inside their room, Okeke and Ngozi spoke in low whispers, their voices careful, thoughtful, as though weighing the future itself. "We must start planning," Ngozi said softly. These girls are growing, and Okeke nodded, his tone calm but firm as he replied, yes, the farmland must be shared wisely. Chinelo will manage the larger portion, she understands work, she will take care of it and it will not be wasted. And though the words were spoken with love and reason, they did not fall on kind ears, for just outside the thin wall, Amoka stood frozen, her breath caught, her eyes wide as every word sank deep into her chest. Silence surrounded her, heavy and suffocating, and then slowly, that silence cracked, giving way to something darker, something fierce, her face tightening as anger burned through her veins, her fist clenching as the thought echoed violently. In her mind, so it is true, everything is for Chinelo, and without another moment, she turned sharply and stormed out into the night, her steps fast, reckless, driven by a rage she could no longer contain, until she reached the familiar gathering spot where Nkiru, Ifunanya, and Chidinma sat laughing over palm wine, their voices loud against the quiet darkness, and as soon as they saw her, Nkiru raised a brow. Amoka, you look like fire, who offended you? And Amoka wasted no time, her voice trembling with anger as she poured everything out. My parents have decided, they want to give Chinelo the bigger farmland, everything, because she works like a servant. As if I am nothing, and her friends exchanged knowing glances, their expressions slowly shifting from amusement to calculation, and Nkiru leaned forward, her voice dropping, sharp and cold. Then remove her, the words hanging in the air like a dangerous whisper, and for a moment, there was silence, thick and uncertain, Amoka blinking, her breath uneven as she tried to process what she had just heard, but before doubt could take root, Ifunanya spoke again, darker this time. No, not just remove her, sell her, and the silence that followed was heavier, deeper, as though even the night itself was listening, and then Chidinma added quietly, there is someone, a man who deals in such things, and from the shadows of their conversation emerged a name spoken with both caution and familiarity, Okoro, a man known in the village as calm, respectable, always greeting elders with a bow. Yet beneath that quiet exterior lived a deception no one openly spoke about, a trader not of goods, but of people, and Amoka's heart pounded loudly in her chest, her mind racing, her conscience flickering weakly for a brief moment as she hesitated, her voice low, uncertain, sell, my own sister, but Nkiru quickly leaned closer, her tone persuasive, almost soothing, if she is gone, everything becomes yours, no more competition, no more shadow over your name, and the temptation sank deep, choking whatever remained of reason, and after a brief pause that felt like the last chance for redemption, Amoka's face hardened, her eyes losing their softness as she nodded slowly, her voice barely above a whisper, yet filled with dangerous resolve, all right, let it be done. Evening settled quietly over the compound, the golden light of the setting sun casting long shadows across the earth, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Amoka's voice carried a softness that felt unfamiliar as she called out, Chinelo, my sister, the words gentle, almost tender, and Chinelo paused where she stood, surprise flickering in her eyes as she turned slowly, her heart unsure yet hopeful, and Amoka smiled faintly, stepping closer, come, let us take a walk, just the two of us, and though something deep within Chinelo stirred with quiet suspicion, the longing for sisterly closeness overpowered it, and she nodded softly, replying, all right, sister, and together they walked side by side, leaving the warmth of the compound behind and entering the quiet embrace of the forest, the air growing still, the sounds of evening birds fading into an uneasy silence, and as they moved deeper, Chinelo's brows furrowed slightly, her voice low, cautious, Amoka, where are we going? But before Amoka could answer, shadows shifted, and suddenly, men stepped out from behind the trees, their presence abrupt and cold, and Chinelo froze, confusion washing over her face as her eyes darted from the strangers to her sister, her voice trembling, Amoka, who are these people? And in that moment, something changed, something broke, as the truth crashed into her, her breath catching, her body shaking, and she screamed, her voice raw with fear, Amoka, what is this? As her knees gave way beneath her, hitting the ground hard, her hands reaching desperately for her sister as tears streamed down her face. Please, please don't do this, I am your sister, Amoka, your own blood, please, she cried, clinging tightly to Amoka's legs, her voice breaking with each word, but Amoka's expression hardened, her eyes cold and distant as she yanked her leg free and stepped back, her voice sharp, final, at least now, you won't take what is mine, and from behind her. The laughter of her friends rose, cruel and heartless, echoing through the trees as Chinello's cries grew louder, more desperate, her hands reaching out, grasping at empty air as the men seized her, dragging her away against her will, her feet scraping the ground, her voice piercing the silence of the forest. Amoka. Amoka. Please. Don't do this. Sister, but Amoka did not move, did not turn, did not look back, and as Chinello was pulled deeper into the darkness, her screams fading slowly into the night, the forest stood as a silent witness to the moment a sister became a stranger forever. Amoka returned home with a calmness that did not belong to the night, her step steady, her face unreadable as though nothing had happened, as though the forest had not just swallowed her sister whole, and inside the compound, Ngozi looked up immediately, her voice laced with concern. Amoka, where is Chinello? While Okeke rose slowly from where he sat, his eyes searching her face for answers, and Amoka merely shrugged, her tone careless, almost dismissive. How should I know? Maybe she ran away with a man, and before the words could even settle, a sharp sound cut through the air as Ngozi's hand struck her across the face, her voice shaking with disbelief and anger. Do not speak such evil about your sister. And silence fell heavily for a moment before panic began to rise like a storm, and without wasting time, Okeke grabbed a lantern, his voice firm but strained. We must find her. And soon the night was broken by flickering lights as they moved through the darkness, calling out desperately, Chinello. Chinello, their voices echoing into the empty distance, swallowed by the forest that offered no reply. Again and again they called, hope clinging weakly to every shout, but only silence answered, and as the hours stretched on, Okeke's voice grew quieter. He stepped slower, until he said nothing at all, his face heavy with a fear he could not voice, while Ngozi's strength gave way completely, her cries piercing the night as she wept openly, my daughter. Where are you? Her body shaking as grief began to take hold, and in the midst of the growing search, a familiar figure appeared, Okoro, the slave trader, his face arranged in practiced concern as he joined them, shaking his head sadly. This is terrible. Chinello is a good girl, we must find her. His voice convincing, his presence reassuring, yet hidden beneath it was the truth only the watching eyes could see. The same man who stood beside them now was the one who had taken her away, and while the village searched with heavy hearts, another gathering took place far from the lantern lights, hidden in the shadows where laughter replaced sorrow. Amoka sat with Nkiru, Ifinanya, and Chidima, a small bundle of money between them, their faces lit not by worry but by satisfaction as they began to divide it. This one is mine, Nkiru said quickly, pulling a portion toward herself, and Ifinanya frowned. Why is yours bigger? While Chidima leaned in, counting carefully, we agreed to share equally, and Amoka, watching them, added coldly, make sure no one cheats me. And for a moment the tension rose until one of them picked up a note, sniffed it dramatically, and said with a crooked smile, this money smells like guilt, and there was a brief pause before the others burst into laughter, loud and careless, their voices echoing into the night, drowning out the distant cries of a mother still searching for her missing child. By the time they arrived at the slave household, the night had long swallowed every familiar path Chinello had ever known, and when the blindfold was finally removed, her eyes struggled to adjust to a place that felt both strange and suffocating, a compound larger than any she had seen, yet colder, emptier in spirit, and standing before her were the people who now held her fate, the master, Eziani, a man whose presence carried authority without warmth, his eyes sharp and calculating, his wife. Obiagili beside him, her gaze equally firm, and not far from them stood their son, Obina, silent, observant, his expression unreadable as he watched the broken girl before him, and without a word of comfort. Chinello was stunned, examined, her arms lifted, her face studied as though she were nothing more than an object brought for purchase, and Obiagili nodded slightly, saying, she is strong, this one will be useful, while Eziani added calmly, good, we will take her. And just like that, her humanity was stripped to a single purpose, and when the trader left, taking with him the last thread of her old life, Chinello's strength finally gave way. She collapsed onto the ground, her body shaking as tears poured endlessly, her voice breaking under the weight of pain. "My mother, my father, why?" she cried into the empty air, her sobs filling the silence of the unfamiliar compound, and no one came to comfort her. No one spoke, until a quiet figure approached, another slave, Addis. Her face wan but her eyes carrying a knowing sadness, and she crouched beside Chinello, her voice low, almost gentle, yet heavy with truth. "Do not cry too much, hope is dangerous here." And Chinello looked up at her through blurred tears, her heart clinging desperately to something, anything, but Addis only shook her head slowly and walked away, leaving her alone with those words that cut deeper than any chain. And for a long time, Chinello wept, until the tears began to dry. Until the pain settled into something quieter, heavier, and slowly, she lifted her head, her breathing unsteady but her eyes beginning to change, and in a voice barely above a whisper, yet filled with a fragile resolve, she said to herself, "If I must live, I will not be broken." And from that moment, something within her shifted, and when work began, Chinello threw herself into it with a strength that surprised even those who watched her, rising before others, moving faster, working harder, her hands remembering every lesson her father had ever taught her. And as days turned into weeks, she began to notice the inefficiencies in the farm, the wasted effort, the disorganization, and quietly, carefully, she started to change things, grouping tasks, teaching others simpler methods, showing them how to plant better, harvest faster, work smarter instead of harder. And at first they resisted, but when they saw the results, they followed, and slowly, the farm transformed, the yields growing larger, the work becoming easier, and what once took long hours now took less time with greater results. And even Eziani began to notice, his eyes narrowing with interest as he observed the fields flourishing beyond expectation, not knowing that the same girl who had arrived broken and in chains was the one silently reshaping everything around her, refusing to be destroyed by the life forced upon her. With time, the tension that once hung heavily over the farm began to soften, replaced in small moments by laughter that felt almost forbidden, and among the slaves, Chinello became a quiet force they both respected and leaned on. And one afternoon as they walked under the sun, one of them wiped sweat from his face and joked loudly, "Oh, if Chinello says dig, we dig fast fast oh," before she changes her mind. And another quickly added with a grin, "Even the yam fears her, it jumps out by itself." And for a brief moment, laughter rippled through them, light and genuine, and Chinello, though tired, allowed a small smile to touch her lips, a rare softness breaking through the weight she carried. And not far from them, Obinna stood watching, his eyes following her movements, not with ownership, but with something deeper, something thoughtful. He saw her strength in the way she walked without complaint, her kindness in how she guided others patiently, never raising her voice, never humiliating anyone, and something about her unsettled him in a way he could not ignore. And one day, gathering his courage, he stepped closer as Chinello walked alone at the edge of the farm, and the moment she noticed him, her body stiffened, fear flashing in her eyes as she dropped what she held and tried to move away quickly. But his voice came soft and urgent, "Wait, please, I mean no harm," and she hesitated, her breathing uneven, her eyes wary as she kept her distance, ready to flee at any moment. And Obinna stopped where he stood, raising his hand slightly as if to show peace, his voice calm, sincere. "I will not hurt you, Chinello," and hearing her name on his lips startled her, but she did not move closer, her voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" And for a moment, he struggled to find the right words before finally saying, quietly but firmly, "I hate what my parents do," and the honesty in his tone caught her off guard, her brows drawing together as she searched his face for deceit, but found none. And from that moment, something small and fragile began to grow between them, not trust, not yet, but a cautious understanding. And as days passed, their interactions became less tense, brief conversations shared in quiet corners, careful words exchanged under watchful eyes, until one evening, as the sun dipped low and the farm grew still, Obinna spoke again, his voice softer than before. "You are different, strong, even after everything, and Chinelo looked away, her voice low, carrying the weight of pain she could not hide. Strength is not by choice, sometimes it is all that is left, and there was a pause before she added, her eyes clouding with distant hurt, I was sold by my own sister, tell me, Obinna, how do I trust again? And the question lingered between them, heavy and unanswered, as he stood there, feeling the depth of her wound, knowing that whatever was beginning between them would have to fight through the shadow of a betrayal that had nearly destroyed her. Obinna could no longer carry the weight of silence, and day after day he stood before his parents, his voice firm, his eyes unwavering as he challenged the life they had built. Father, this is wrong, he would say, his tone steady but filled with urgency. These are human beings, not property. And Eziani would frown, his voice low with authority. You speak like a child who does not understand the world. But Obinna refused to back down, stepping closer. No, father, it is you who refuses to see. The gods are watching, and there will be consequences for this. And Obiagili would try to silence him. Enough, Obinna, do not bring misfortune upon this house. Yet he persisted, again and again, his words wearing down their resistance like water against stone, until one day, after a long silence that seemed to stretch endlessly, Eziani called everyone together, his face unreadable, and the slaves gathered, uncertain, fear and curiosity mixing in their eyes, and then he spoke, his voice loud and clear, from today, you are all free, and for a moment, no one moved, no one breathed, as if the words had not yet found meaning, and then it broke, like a dam giving way, cries filled the air, some fell to their knees in disbelief, others wept openly, laughter mixing with tears as confusion turned into overwhelming joy, and Chinelo stood among them, her heart pounding, her eyes wide as the reality slowly settled upon her. Freedom, something she had almost stopped believing in. And as the noise softened, Eziani turned to her specifically, his gaze thoughtful. Chinelo, you have brought great change to this farm, and Obiagili nodded, adding, because of you, our harvests have multiplied, and before she could speak, he continued, we are giving you land, and wealth, as a reward, and Chinelo's breath caught, her voice barely forming words, thank you, sir. And then Obiagili exchanged a glance with her husband before saying, we also see how our son looks at you. You have our blessing, and Obinna's face lit with quiet relief as Chinelo lowered her gaze, a mix of emotion swirling within her, and though joy filled the moment, one truth remained, she had to return home. But when the journey began, reality presented its own challenge. Chinelo did not know the way back, her memory clouded by the blindfold that had taken her from everything she knew, and so they traveled from village to village, asking questions. Please, have you heard of this place? Chinelo would ask gently, describing what she could remember, and some would nod confidently only to point them in the wrong direction. Go straight, then turn where you see a big tree, one man said, and hours later they found themselves in the same place, and Obinna groaned in frustration, wiping sweat from his face. This big tree must be following us around, while Chinelo tried not to laugh, covering her mouth as she said softly, be patient, we will find it, and another time, an old woman insisted, oh, I know that village, just follow the road until it bends like a snake, and Obinna muttered under his breath as they walked, now we are looking for a snake-shaped road, and despite the exhaustion, small moments of laughter found their way into the journey, easing the tension as they pressed on, guided by hope, determined to find the place where her story had been broken, and where, perhaps, it could finally be made whole again. The moment Chinelo's familiar figure appeared at the edge of the village, screams erupted like thunder through the compound, villagers spilling from their huts, eyes wide, mouths open in disbelief. Chinelo, is it really you? And her parents stumbled forward, their faces pale, voices trembling. Our daughter, it cannot be. But before reason could settle, Chinelo broke into a run, her feet barely touching the earth, and she flung herself into their arms, sobbing, her body shaking with relief and joy, and Rosie collapsed almost completely, her hands gripping Chinelo tightly as tears streamed down her face, her voice breaking, my child, my dear child, you have returned, while Okeke dropped to one knee, head bowed in gratitude, whispering prayers under his breath, thank you, ancestors, thank you for bringing her back," and as they clung to each other, the air heavy with emotion, Chinelo finally pulled back slightly, her voice trembling but fierce. "Mother, father, I must tell you. Amoka, she sold me, with the help of Okoro, the slave trader. They took me away," and silence fell, sharp and thick, each villager frozen, eyes widening, mouths opening and closing without words, and then chaos broke like a storm, shouts erupting from every corner. "What? Amoka? Our own Amoka," and Amoka, standing in the doorway, froze, her face paling, her lips parted as if words might come, but none did, and before she could gather herself, strong hands grabbed her arms, villagers dragging her from the compound, her protests muffled. "I did not stop. I am behind her," her friends bolted, desperate to escape, but villagers were faster, grabbing them by the shoulders, pulling them down, their laughter and confidence replaced with fear, the village now a courtroom of judgment, every eye fixed on the sister who had betrayed her own blood, while Chinelo stood with her parents, tears still on her cheeks, heart still pounding, yet in that moment, she felt a strange quiet. The beginning of justice, the weight of betrayal finally laid bare. As news of Chinelo's return spread, the hunt for Okoro became relentless, and when the slave trader realized the villagers were closing in, he tried to flee, his feet pounding the earth in desperate escape, but strong hands grabbed him, dragging him back through the dust, his shouts echoing, "No! You cannot take me. I am a respected man," and the villagers ignored him, their anger too deep, their sense of justice too strong, and soon he stood trembling before the village court, King Egwinanenyalu presiding, his face solemn, eyes sharp, his voice carrying the weight of tradition and law. "Okoro, you stand accused of crimes against our people, of selling our children into bondage. What do you say for yourself?" And Okoro's words faltered, I did what I was paid to do," and the king's gaze did not waver. "Payment does not erase sin, nor does it absolve you of punishment," and with a firm nod, the verdict was given. Okoro would be imprisoned, his freedom taken as payment for the lives he had destroyed, and others who had aided him were punished according to their role, their cries mingling with the murmurs of the crowd, a chorus of justice and anger. Yet in the midst of this, all eyes turned to Amoka, waiting for her sister's fury, for the voice that would condemn. And then Chinelo stepped forward, her chest rising with quiet resolve, her voice clear but calm. "I forgive her," and a hush fell over the crowd, villagers staring, mouths open, disbelief written on every face, the murmurs of shock rolling through them like waves. Amoka's knees buckled, her hands flying to her face, tears streaming uncontrollably as she sobbed, "Chinelo, my sister, forgive me. I am sorry. I am so sorry." And Chinelo reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder, her eyes soft yet firm. "It is done, let us start again," and the crowd, stunned into silence, slowly exhaled, realizing that true strength was not in revenge but in mercy, that the girl once sold into slavery had returned not only with freedom but with a heart powerful enough to heal even the deepest betrayal. The day of Chinelo's wedding dawned bright and full of life, the compound alive with the rhythm of drums and the scent of roasted yams, the air thick with joy as villagers gathered for the grand traditional celebration. Women in colorful wrappers danced, their feet stamping in time with the drums, men sang praises and clapped their hands, and everywhere, laughter and music mingled, filling the space with an energy that felt unstoppable. And Chinelo, radiant in her attire, moved gracefully toward Obina, her eyes shining, his hand steady as he took hers, their hearts beating in unison, while elders blessed them, chanting prayers for prosperity. Children ran through the crowd waving leaves, and voices rose in unrestrained jubilation. "Long life to the bride! Long life to the groom!" And in the midst of the celebration, Amoka watched from the edge, her own heart heavy with regret, the memory of her betrayal gnawing at her even as she smiled at her sister's happiness, and slowly, quietly, she began to change, taking to the work of the farm, her hands no longer idle, her voice no longer sharp, learning humility and patience with every task. And when she eventually married, her days were filled with diligence and care. Yet in the quiet moments, late at night when the drums had stopped and the laughter faded, the guilt she carried whispered to her, reminding her always of the sister she had wronged and the mercy she had received. "Chinelo forgave me, how can I forgive myself?" she would murmur softly, and though she had built a life, her joy was tempered by memory, a shadow that never left her, yet even in that shadow, she learned what it meant to live humbly and honestly, striving to honor the sister who had shown her the meaning of grace. In the soft mornings and golden evenings that followed, Chinelo visited her parents often, stepping lightly into the compound where she had once been a child and where she had once been lost, her laughter now mingling with theirs, her presence a quiet balm over old wounds, and Ngozi would embrace her tightly, whispering, "My daughter, you have returned to us fully," while Okeke nodded, eyes glistening, "Our home feels whole again." And in these moments, even Amoka walked beside them, her hands busy, her heart learning the rhythm of humility, the air filled with warmth, the farm alive with chatter and purpose, and as Chinelo rested for a moment under the white tree, her eyes soft and serene. As we bring Chinelo's story to a close, let us pause and reflect on the powerful lessons hidden within her journey. Life often places us in moments of betrayal, jealousy, and hardship, but it is in how we respond that our true character is revealed. Chinelo teaches us that hard work, patience, and perseverance can transform even the darkest circumstances, that resilience is born not from ease, but from enduring what others throw at us and rising stronger. Her forgiveness of Amoka reminds us that mercy is a strength greater than revenge, that letting go of anger can heal both the wronged and the wrongdoer. Amoka's regret shows that choices have consequences, but even the most wayward hearts can find redemption when they embrace humility and change. The moral is clear: jealousy may poison relationships, greed may destroy trust, but love, forgiveness, and integrity can rebuild what hatred tries to shatter. Let Chinelo's courage and grace inspire us to work hard, to forgive, and to never lose hope, no matter how impossible life may seem. Her story is a testament to the truth that even in the darkest night, the dawn of redemption and joy is always possible.